Now, China is South Africa's largest trading partner, but concern has been raised about the balance of trade. And let me bring in Azwimpheleli Langalanga now. He's from the South African Institute of International Relations. Azwi, thanks a lot for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so in April, South Africa recorded a 73 billion rand trade deficit with China. Of course, as much as we would look forward to the deals to change that scenario, much of what happens in the coming days is really about South Africa's posture in this trade relationship, isn't it?
Yes. It is. I think what is most important is how South Africa benefits from the relationship. Because for now, like you're saying, the trade deficit, we have a huge trade deficit with China. We export a lot of raw materials to China and import a lot of finished products. So what is important for us going forward is to see how we can use the relationship to also build our own industries. For instance, we have a lot of talk about beneficiation in the industrial policy, and it is important that we use this relationship to build an industry ourselves so that we can also export finished products to China.
So what are the do's and don'ts over the coming days for South Africa?
I think over the coming days, what is important is to move from a more geopolitical position, which is high level, and focus on the details. Because if you, most of the times when you look at these deals, you find that they are very much couched in a way that China benefits. But we tend to focus more on the relationship at a geopolitical level. So it's important that when we go forward, we look at the details so that it's a win-win situation for both parties.
I see President Jacob Zuma likely to share some of the country's ideas on projects with his Chinese counterpart. Those were essentially drawn up by the economic cluster.
Yes.
How do you think those discussions on those specific projects will unfold this week? I mean, ideally, it's about identifying projects and expediting their implementation. So let's talk about the projects and what do you think will unfold there?
I think the project that is promising for me, I think maybe the Transnet project, where the Chinese they've given a loan to Transnet, but then they will also, the money is also going to be used to procure locomotives from China. Yeah. So, but that is something you find a lot in Chinese deals in Africa generally, where that money has to go back to the Chinese economy. So there might be positive spin-offs there if in the deals we also put issues like skills transfer, technology transfer, which is something that lacks a lot when China does business in Africa. And it's important for South Africa as the leading economy and the leading country in Africa to start to have deals that really talk to benefit both parties in a very, very detailed way.
Now, you alluded to this in your first answer, this perennial term that we use, beneficiation, where we try and take the most advantage of our country's raw materials. Is it about China sharing their expertise on how we unlock beneficiation, or is it about them coming over here and setting up a camp and factory so that we can expedite that process? How do you deal with that?
Yes, it's about the Chinese setting up a factory in South Africa and maybe bring their own expertise. But then we have a sort of contractual arrangements that actually say that after 5 years, you should have trained so much South Africans. Then after that, then the Chinese can leave the factory and it's run by South Africans. That has not been happening at all in most deals in Africa. And I think in this week, that is the discussion, which is a very difficult discussion because it's not in the Chinese way of doing business to have skills transfer happening.
Is that going to be a difficult discussion or not?
I think it's going to be quite a difficult discussion because the Chinese are not used to that. But South Africa also has to recognize our own leverage in these issues because China understands the importance of South Africa in the continent. So we can have a more or less equal relationship, bargaining relationship because of that geopolitical relationship position that we have in the continent. And if we can bring that to the table, then I'm sure we can get good concessions from the Chinese.
I asked the question because one tends to get drowned by all the quite spectacular numbers going to the billions and looking at the dozens of deals that have been signed. One tends to sort of ignore the very foundations of the relationship economically, isn't it?
Yes. So the deals are quite misleading. If the billions and everything, that really does not, many times it has not translated into real issues on the ground. What is important is after those deals have been concluded, the agreements that come after that to say that how do we then translate these mega deals into projects on the ground? Usually what happens is that the Chinese will then come, first if they give the country the loan, the procuring has to be done from China. Then the skills, usually they bring their own labor, and there's no skills transfer. But South Africa has very good institutions and a good framework. It has good policies that if it brings them into the table to say that, for instance, procurement, you have to procure locally, and there should be skills transfer, your BEE policies, if they can come be brought into the table, that will be very important. I think the framework is there, but we need that to realize first our leverage, and then secondly to bring those issues onto the table.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Azwimpheleli Langalanga, thanks very much indeed for coming in from the South African Institute of International Relations.
Thank you.